Israel's threatening to resume the genocide against the Palestinian people, even as the bereaved and traumatized and starved people of Gaza sift through the rubble of their destroyed territory to find the bodies of their loved ones. Israel-backed gangs linked to ISIS are attempting to foster violent chaos, and there are reports that Israel has already broken the ceasefire, while the treatment of Palestinian hostages by both Israel and the Western media exposes, once again, the absolute shameless racism which has defined this genocide. Let's start with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, with an arrest warrant issued against him by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Yesterday, in a statement, he declared, "Through joint efforts, we achieved enormous victories, victories that astonished the entire world, and I want to say everywhere we fought, we won. But in the same breath, I must tell you the campaign is not over. There are still very great security challenges ahead of us. Some of our enemies are trying to rebuild themselves to attack us again, and as we say, we're on it." Does that sound like a man who's preparing to end violence? This may mean many things, for example, the resumption of genocide in Gaza or a new attack on Iran, or both. The one thing itself evidently does not mean is peace. Then listen to this from the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz. Israel's great challenge after the phase of returning the hostages will be the destruction of all of Hamas's terror tunnels in Gaza, directly by the IDF and through the international mechanism to be established under the leadership and supervision of the United States. This is the primary significance of implementing the agreed upon principle of demilitarizing Gaza and neutralizing Hamas of its weapons. I've instructed the IDF to prepare for carrying out the mission. Now, Donald Trump's 20-point plan commits the destruction of what is described as all military terror and offensive infrastructure, including tools and weapons production. Now, aside from Hamas refusing to commit to disarmament, nowhere does the plan commit to the IDF destroying any tunnels. So what does that mean in practice? Preparing the IDF to destroy tunnels, not least given the peace deal instructs Israel to withdraw from nearly half of Gaza. So how would it be attacking those tunnels? Well, we can see how they sought, according to their own rationale, to destroy tunnels, and that was by carpet bombing Gaza. Meanwhile, there are reports that Israeli forces have killed a Palestinian man in Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza. Just imagine for one moment that Hamas had killed an Israeli soldier. What would happen? It'd be all over the news, splashed as Hamas breaking the ceasefire and lead to an Israeli military onslaught. Yet this killing is ignored across the entire Western media because Palestinian life is deemed to have no real meaning. In the central Gaza Strip, meanwhile, Israeli tanks opened fire at Palestinian civilians. We can see here how Israel interprets the word ceasefire. It's where, yes, sure, its opponents cease firing, but where it can continue to fire at will. That's what happened, of course, during the last so-called ceasefire. Now, even when the ceasefire was supposedly being agreed, as the brilliant Dropsite News report, Israeli soldiers celebrated it by launching an arson spree in Gaza, burning down civilian infrastructure, including an essential sanitation plant in Gaza City. They note testimonies of Israeli soldiers collected earlier this year by the Israeli journalist Yuval Abraham, such as one explaining, "Every Arab house we entered had olive oil. We poured the oil on the sofas, on anything flammable in the apartment, and then we ignited it or threw in a smoke grenade. This was a common practice." In the last few days, Israeli soldiers posted images of themselves burning buildings, with one posing in a picture in front of burning wooden pallets, writing, "On Friday, just before departure, burning food so it won't reach the gardens. May their names be erased." In a photo of the burning sanitation plant, one soldier is photographed smiling, another adds, "One last memory." Again, just wantonly genocidal. It's not subtle. There is incredible footage of Palestinians returning en masse to where they lived in northern Gaza. But they are returning to homes that have been destroyed by the Israeli state. Footage from Associated Press shows apocalyptic ruin. According to the United Nations Satellite Center, 83% of all structures in Gaza City have been destroyed or damaged by late September. That destruction is more comprehensive than that suffered by Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the nuclear bombs, and Dresden after its firebombing by the Allies. The destruction includes 97% of tree crops, 95% of shrubs, and 82% of annual crops. Let's listen to this report from Channel 4 News.
Gaza has been reduced to ruins. Less than half of all hospitals are operating in any form. 90% of schools are damaged or destroyed. The ferocity of Israel's assault on Gaza is unprecedented in modern times. On this UN map, the red areas represent destruction, and you can see how Israeli attacks were initially largely concentrated in the north. Then they spread right across the territory as practically the entire population was displaced. By now, more than 90% of all homes have been damaged or destroyed, with some areas completely leveled. This was the city of Khan Yunis before the war, a population of around 400,000 people. 2 years later, this is what's left. In total, there's said to be 61 million tons of debris in Gaza that could take years to clear. And you wonder what kind of future anyone there will be able to build.
Destruction unprecedented in modern times. 61 million tons of debris. Nobody with any honesty can claim that this was about recovering hostages. Israel killed more hostages than it retrieved by military means, or about defeating Hamas, who are now retaking control of areas abandoned by Israeli forces. Listen indeed to French President Emmanuel Macron last month.
In terms of fighting against Hamas, this is a failure today.
What is a failure?
Because they killed all the key leaders. This is a success. But at the beginning of this war, you had more or less 25,000 Hamas fighters. The Israeli army killed probably half of them, but Hamas managed to recruit the equivalent. You have as many fighters as at the very beginning, which is the best evidence of the fact if we want to dismantle Hamas, the total war is not the answer, because it's just killing the credibility of Israel, and by the way, weakening and killing our own credibility if we don't make a move.
This was a genocide war of annihilation, which is exactly what Israeli political and military leaders promised from the very beginning, because no crime in history has been so confessed to as it happened in our history. We've no idea how many Palestinians have actually been killed by the Israeli state in these 2 years of depravity, either directly through military violence or indirectly through the destruction of healthcare and thus untreated illnesses and injuries, the destruction of homes, deliberate starvation, lack of fresh water, and so on. We know that dozens of bodies are now being pulled from the rubble, even without heavy machinery, and that Gaza's Civil Defense Agency estimates that up to 10,000 bodies are crushed into debris and collapsed buildings. All of the living Israeli hostages held by Hamas have now been returned to their families, and that's a good thing, a thing to be welcomed and celebrated. The taking of civilians as hostages is a grave crime, whoever does it. But today, Israel is releasing 1,700 Palestinian hostages, and they are hostages, even if the Western media refuses to call them as such. As the Palestinian analyst Mohammed Shahada puts it, they were all kidnapped after October 7th, held as bargaining chips without trial, charges, or legal counsel. Any media outlet that calls them prisoners is morally bankrupt. That includes women and children who were kidnapped. Many Palestinian hostages still remain in captivity, and they too must be freed. As the journalist Dominic Waghorn puts it, the full force of Israel's PR machine will be deployed over the coming days of hostage releases and Trump visit. Meanwhile, Israel is banning press interviews with families of released Palestinian prisoners, this in a country that prides itself on democracy and press freedom. There is a reason that hostages, Palestinian hostages, have been banned from talking to journalists, because there is overwhelming evidence that these hostages have been subjected to industrialized torture, rape, starvation. For example, back in April, 17-year-old Palestinian child hostage Walid Khalid Abdullah Ahmed starved to death in captivity, one of dozens killed because of torture and abuse. We won't have these big humanizing media pieces about those Palestinian hostages, including kids who've been held hostage with no charge, nothing, kidnapped from their families for nothing, held in unbearable, hideous conditions. We're not going to see humanizing packages in broadcast news or in newspapers. Palestinians are not treated as humans. Note that the ceasefire agreement makes clear that for every Israeli hostages whose remains are released, Israel will release the remains of 15 deceased Gazans. In other words, a confession that they are holding dead Palestinian bodies hostage on a mass scale. Meanwhile, Israel has allowed an Israeli journalist to film the humiliation of Palestinian hostages.
בעוד כמה ימים עוברים לכלא אחר כדי לממש את עסקת שחרור החטופים והמחבלים עם מאסרי עולם עם דם על הידיים שמשתחררים ממש בעוד כמה ימים במסגרת העסקה. אלה המחבלים עם דם על הידיים, מחבלים מאסרי עולם שמשוחררים במסגרת עסקת שחרור החטופים הנוכחית, ממש מכינים אותם לקראת השחרור.
This behavior, violating the dignity of those who are imprisoned, is a total violation of the norms and laws of war. Meanwhile, Israeli-backed gangs, who Israeli politicians themselves stated were linked to ISIS, are fighting Hamas. Now, these gangs looted aid amongst other crimes, contributing to the starvation of the Palestinian people. What next? Israel has banned foreign journalists from entering Gaza, claiming that's because it's an active war zone, a nonsense, a lie, because they didn't want the crimes they committed to be reported, even though, of course, journalists have reported from every other war zone in history. It's just nonsense. Without Palestinian journalists, who suffered the biggest slaughter of journalists in history, we wouldn't know what Israel has done. But what excuse do they now have for not letting in foreign journalists? Let's see what happens there. Will they allow those foreign journalists to come in and report on the horrors that the Israeli state has inflicted against the Palestinian people? And what of reconstruction? Will an Israel which publicly committed to removing the Palestinian population from Gaza, which is set to occupy about half the territory, which it is leaving depopulated, by the way, will it really allow it to be rebuilt? Because without reconstruction, Palestinians will keep dying en masse in the ruins, even if not one more bomb is dropped on Gaza. Will Trump really not let Israel resume the military phase of this genocide? Well, we've got to desperately hope so, because the Palestinian people have suffered unimaginable horror. And the celebrations of the people of Gaza, notwithstanding how awful this agreement is in practice, tell their own story. That is a people desperate to breathe. It is striking that Trump declared the reason for the agreement is that he told Netanyahu, Israel cannot fight the world, Bibi. They can't fight the world. Trump knows that people across the West, including in the US, have turned against Israel in revulsion at its crimes. And the hope they have is that they can suppress the truth to turn that around. We can't let them. We must document all the crimes that have been committed, including all those crimes that have been hidden and suppressed, and not look away from Gaza in the coming weeks and months. A message for the Palestinian people of Gaza. You have suffered one of the great crimes of history. Genocide is described as the crime of crimes for a reason. With the weapons and support provided by our governments in the West, the Israeli state has sought to destroy your people. They have wiped out your homes and they have destroyed your hospitals and your schools. They have murdered your doctors, your nurses, your paramedics, your aid workers, and your journalists. They have exterminated entire extended families, wiped forever from your civil registry. They have murdered tens of thousands of your children, whether they be sleeping in their beds or cowering in cars or shelters or playing out in the street. They have used your people as target practice. They have deliberately starved you. They have withheld the basics of life needed for survivals, whether it be baby formula or medicine. They have violently displaced you countless times. They have left you all traumatized, whether it be from 2 years of daily depravity, bombs falling on you, bullets firing at you, wondering each day if it will be your last, all of you left bereaved, having lost loved ones, parents, sons, daughters, siblings, grandparents, lovers, cherished friends. The horrors you have suffered are beyond our imagination. But like other victims of genocide throughout the dark past of our species, your tormentors have failed to extinguish you. You have shown that existence is resistance. Your spirit, your determination has inspired so many people all over the world. And one day, it's my firm conviction, you will not just free Palestine, you will free us all. Because you have opened people's eyes all over the world about the evil our own rulers and our media outlets are capable of. If they lied to us about this, people have concluded, what else are they lying about? And if they can do this to the Palestinian people, then who will be next? It's our responsibility as citizens of countries that have inflicted such horror and suffering on your people to keep building pressure on our own governments to stop facilitating the crimes being committed against you. And our promise must be that we will never, ever give up on you. Please like and subscribe, leave your thoughts in your comments, help us take on the pro-genocide media, and a media which has facilitated one of the great crimes of our age. This crime would not have been possible without Western media outlets. Their fingerprints are all over the crime scene that is, of course, Gaza. But you can help us as we expand, particularly when I finish my book, which I'm writing at the moment, The Fall of the West, at patreon.com/ownjazz84. Do leave your comments, share the video. I'll speak to you in a bit.